Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the KLNS Rugby Podcast. This season, we have unrivaled coverage of the club and international game in Ireland and further afield, including a topic that we're going to focus on over the next fortnight, the United Rugby Championship. Tonight, we're going to venture off the island to look at the other competing nations, with a guest each from Wales, Italy, Scotland, and South Africa. With me to discuss the season ahead, we have a brilliant four-man panel. Returning to the show, we have Hugh Griffin of the Pirate Rugby Podcast, etc., and so on from there. We've got Craig Manson of the Scottish Rugby Pod and Mike Petretta of the Fratelli di Rugby Podcast. And joining for the first time, we also have Bulls fan and South Africa fan, who I'm sure is gleaming after the first test between South Africa and New Zealand, Johan Jordan. Gentlemen, you're all very welcome to the show. I'm sure we're all excited to see rugby back and to be talking about it face first, I suppose.
Absolutely. Delighted to be here. Delighted to be on such an esteemed panel as well. It's my first time meeting Mike and Craig. Craig, we've got a couple of mutual friends, like David from Scrum of the Earth, and I think Harley Worthy as well knows yourself. So it's good to connect for the first time, sort of directly.
Absolutely, it's great to be here again, and great to see everyone again. And to meet new faces.
Yeah, that's the point of it, because the United Rugby Championship is about being united, etc., PR lines and go from there. But we're gonna start things off because the new season's around the corner. We're going to ask this question next week as well about the excitement levels. Hugh, I'm going to start with you, and it's not pointed. I promise you, but as a Scarlets fan and as a URC fan, where's the excitement at as we head into the new season?
Look, call me crazy, but I am actually most excited about watching the Scarlets because they're my team, and I've managed to bury the pain from the last time I watched them, and now I'm ready to hurt again. No, but seriously, watching my team in sport is what brings me joy. It's my hobby, and I just want to do that again. I'd watch us if we were playing whoever in the street outside. I'd watch us if we were playing Toulouse in a Champions Cup final, which is but 18 months away, I'm sure. So
yeah, have to be in the Champions Cup final for that to happen.
It's definitely going to happen. Look, we've just been unlucky so far. Referees have cost us badly, but yeah, I'm excited for it, and there's so many narratives to get into. Can't wait to see it all unfold.
Absolutely, Johan. I'll come to you next. I know the Bulls, their season didn't end as well as you would have liked last year, but as a South African fan, and we record this before the second test against New Zealand, you must be feeling fairly happy about the prospect of more rugby coming onto the screen.
Yeah, I think I must be honest, I never thought the Bulls would make it to the final. They had recruited a bunch of new guys. It looked like it was working well, but I never thought they would go that far. I thought a little bit of luck also, but they did very well. I think this year they're going to do better.
Hopefully. Well, I'm not going to say hopefully and win it, because obviously we all want our own respective teams to win it. But that's a slight point. We're being friendly. It's early on the podcast. The jibes will come later. I'm going to hand it over to Mike now. Mike, I know you're representing both Benetton and Zebra tonight, but Zebra's opening result in the pre-season and Benetton's wave of signings, there must be a buzz not just from yourself, but in Italian rugby heading into the club season.
Yeah, a lot of excitement by the Italian fans. I think obviously there's two sort of very almost like polar ends with Zebra and now obviously Benetton now looking to really push on from where they ended last year. Zebra obviously under new management, so again, a bit of a buzz with that. Massimo Brunello was the under-20s coach, so he's going to come into a lot of familiar faces, and like you said, a 31-0 victory right at the start of the season is nothing to sort of like look over really. So yeah, really excited about it, and yeah, hopefully we've got a lot to talk about in this pod.
Yeah, I think we will. To close out this particular section, Craig Manson, you're with us again after your Six Nations appearances. But as an Edinburgh fan and as a Scottish rugby fan, times are pretty good. Dare we say, Glasgow are URC champions. Edinburgh, they're knocking on the door. They should at least had been top 8 last year. Where's your excitement at?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. Great to be here again, as I say. The excitement's coming from me a little bit. I'm obviously a fair bit older than yourself. I've got a son who's just back to pre-season training. So there's excitement to see him playing in university rugby and also in club rugby. Club rugby's getting together a bit, so there's a bit of excitement starting to brood there. And then with Edinburgh, there is so much untapped, um, you know, the team that they have is just needing to be brought on or given some sort of job or actually given a bit of a boost somehow, because there is so much untapped talent in that team that last season just was an absolute waste of them. So yeah, I'm excited to see what can be done. There's some new coaches involved. So we'll see how it goes. Scottish rugby as a whole seems to be fairly warm and fuzzy at the moment. We've taken a fairly big scalp in the Scottish rugby sort of back room from Ireland. So we've got
That depends on who you ask, Craig. We might
well, there
discuss
is
that off mic.
yeah, there's a lot of different points of view. So, but also Glasgow, I'm going to really do them down a little bit here by saying coming out of nowhere and winning the URC, because nobody expected them to win the URC, has really boosted a mixture of people, kids playing rugby. There's a trophy tour around a load of clubs in Scotland as well. So it's all kind of doing this, boosting at the moment, Scottish rugby. So, and to be perfectly honest, Scottish rugby needs a bit of boosting because we're too busy, we're very, very pessimistic, and very, very grumpy most of the time. Even when it's going well, we're always looking for the trap door. So I guess it's nice to just ride that positive wave for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is something about, like, we discussed it at the end of last season. I know we kind of didn't do a podcast here because I was burnt by the results. I think we'll put it that way. And my other guests were burnt by the results.
Out you.
Shut up now, you.
There may have
I
been
could
a
mute you.
podcast that was planned that may have been cancelled, such as the pain.
To be fair, I had said we're going to do a podcast in the Thursday beforehand, and then it just didn't come. But anyways, that excitement, like the fact that we've had 3 winners from 3 different countries, 3 different shields, it's what's part of framing the URC, I feel like, because you've had the Stormers in an All South African final. Obviously, Munster went down there, very similar to Glasgow, and did it the hard way in terms of their knockout games. Then Glasgow do it. And now you've got teams like Leinster and the Bulls and the Sharks and, maybe not Edinburgh quite yet, but Edinburgh and Ulster and a couple of the Welsh teams you're asking them to kick on now, get to your next level. And even for Benetton, it feels like their next level is just around the corner as well. I think that frames the season nicely. But as much as it might kill me as a Munster fan, but as a journalist, I kind of have to start with them and with the Scottish sides. And Craig, I'll open the floor to you to give us a run through on Glasgow and on Edinburgh. Just your thoughts on the Scottish sides firstly, and how you see them faring this season, because I think if you're being true to yourself, both teams will feel like playoffs is the minimum.
Yeah, and I think playoffs has always been the minimum. And I think we again, I'm going to go back to an old trope that I continually have been trotting out on the Scottish Rugby Pod and also on your podcast as well. Glasgow, and I keep saying this, and it sounds like I'm being very detrimental to Glasgow, and I'm not meaning it this way, but what Franco Smith has done with Glasgow and with the player roster that he has, and what we have at Edinburgh, the player roster we have, and the complete implosion that Edinburgh have had. Scottish rugby should be in a good position. We should be riding the wave. We should be expecting to be hitting playoffs on a regular basis, because we have both teams have world class players, whether it's Boffelli in the Edinburgh team, Richie Gray in Glasgow. We've got I keep calling him the old Australian. Totally, his name's just gone right out of my head right at the moment. But the number 8 for Glasgow,
Jack Dempsey.
Jack Dempsey, yeah, all world class players. Matt Fagerson, Xander Fagerson, which I fully expect to be one of the top 2 tight heads going on tour with the Lions this year or this season. You know, we have these top players, these world-class players, and it's just a matter of actually using them correctly. Franco Smith has really tapped into that. Unfortunately, Edinburgh hasn't. And so it's just a matter of, for me, this season looks like, you know, I would expect Glasgow to have more of the same. They've made some good signings over the closed period. And so I would expect Glasgow to come on strong. Have a fairly winning mentality. As we all know, the best time to win a game is when you've just won one, and just get some momentum going straight away. Edinburgh just need to. I think they had a situation a couple of years ago under Mike Blair where they won a lot of games but only got 4 points, didn't get the bonus point. And I think Edinburgh this year need to just, they had the same, but it was with the difference between winning and losing. They were losing by 4 points or 3 points or 2 points. And I think if they can unlock their attack this year, because their defense is pretty good, their physicality is pretty good. They just seem to be using Route One all the time at the moment. So if they can open up their centre partnership, bring on this new centre partnership that's arrived, and try and open up their attack, I think they could be quite dynamic and could be threatening. So yeah, to go back to your initial point, playoffs must have to be a must. Glasgow, I think, will be obviously looking to win it again. Edinburgh have Grant Gilchrist has come out and said that he expects Edinburgh to be winning it this year. I'm not really on his level just yet. I was on the Scrum of the Earth with David last year and promptly said that we were going to win the whole thing. Edinburgh was going to win the whole thing, and everyone laughed. I don't know why they laughed at me, but it's you know, we will see how it goes. But I think I would like to at least see them top 8 and get into the playoffs.
Yeah, no, and I think that's reasonable because I think, as you said, the talent is there with Edinburgh and with Glasgow, and I think you could probably make a case that Glasgow mightn't have as strong of a roster, but probably are better coached and well drilled and more consistent. I don't think anyone could argue with that. And Mike, I might get your take. I know the Italian teams are in the same shield, but obviously from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Glasgow, it feels like everyone will install them as one of the top 5 teams. But the trick for Edinburgh is the gap between 5th or 6th best team in the league and 11th or 12th is so narrow. We've seen it last year. And it's going to be so hard to make up the difference that we've seen last year, where they had more wins than the Ospreys and the Lions, but lost out because of bonus points.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think, you know, we're coming into a point where the URC is like incredibly competitive. Last year, obviously, last season really sort of highlighted that. But I think from an Italian standpoint, there's definitely some progress that both teams are going to want. And like I said right at the start, they're almost at sort of different ends of where they are in their journey. Obviously, there's been some continuity from Benetton's side with the same coaching staff, with, you know, that large contingent of Italian players who have played, quite frankly, quite a lot of rugby together. And obviously there's going to be a period right at the start of the season where potentially that's going to damage the team, because obviously they've got a prolonged period off. So for the first few games, the large contingent of Italian players such as Menoncello, Lobrex, etc., probably won't be playing. That said, Benetton have come in and they've signed some, you know, pretty impressive players, considering, you know, not having Brex and having someone like Fekatoa to be able to you know, step in, or, you know, Lewis Liner coming in, or Matt Gallagher, who's clearly sort of really been working hard in the background as well on his communication, which again could always be a bit of an issue at the start of the season, traveling to somewhere like Italy or France. You always see some players take a little bit extra time to sort of bed in. So from a Benetton standpoint, I think, you know, their expectation is playoffs minimum. I think that is the set sort of standard. They've invested a hell of a lot of money over the past 2 seasons. Realistically, I think they're going to want to try and improve on where they were at. My one sort of concern in terms of if we had to try and sort of identify an obstacle is how much weight they're going to put on the Champions Cup, because it's the first time they've been in the Champions Cup in a long time. So it's going to sort of really see sort of from from the top down how much weight they put on it, because it might not necessarily be a coaching objective, but it might be from further above. So from that
It's a
side,
nasty enough pool for them as well. Like it, I know you got 2 home games, 2 away games. They probably have their 2 easier games away and 2 harder games, or sorry, 2 harder games at home, yeah, and 2 easier games away. So there's no like sense of, oh, they'll win this one, and that probably changed that balance. And then you got the fact that, well, at Christmas time they're playing Zebra, they'll back themselves to beat Zebra. Do you just go for it anyway in December and go from there? It's going to be a fine balancing act for them with Europe, isn't it?
yeah. So again, I think it's really going to be contingent on how much weight, is put on the carpet from right at the top. I obviously, every team is going to go in with the mentality of winning every game. However, I think where the Italian teams have traditionally sort of faltered in the past is that they've never really sort of targeted games which are realistically, better for them to try and target. So, Zebre, we saw it, week in, week out last season, where they'd lose by 2-3 points against, some of the top teams, because and then the following week they'd be playing maybe positioning the table a team closer to them, and they're knackered and they've caught a couple of injuries, and they don't play as well. But from Zebra's standpoint, just because I want to sort of finish on a real positive, I genuinely think this year is a big year for them. I think a lot of the players that have been there now, like the under-20 players that got promoted 2 seasons ago, they've got 2 seasons of URC experience now. They've got Brunello, who has coached them for 7-8 years at age grade. And yeah, it definitely feels slightly different. That game where they held Glasgow, admittedly a young Glasgow, 31-0 last week. I watched the entire game and it was a different Zebra. They were playing a very different brand of rugby. So yeah, positive from me, mate.
And that's good to see. And Johan, I might just get your take on the Scottish and the Italians in just for a second, because like the bare bones about it is, in the last 20 odd years, there's been 2 wins from those four competing nations, both of which by Glasgow, one of which last year. What do you think the perception in South Africa is of them? Because really, if we look at it from our perspective,
There's the Rainbow Cup erasure there from
sorry, the Rainbow Cup as well. So there's 3, but which they beat the Bulls, unfortunately. So I think
URC
Johan
0, as I call it.
URC
Yeah.
-1 nearly. But I just want to see, Johan, what's the perception in South Africa of these teams? Because we see them as 3 out of 4 are playoff contenders, but other countries might say, well, they're not great. So what's the perception in South Africa?
I was quite happy to see how Benetton did last season. They surprised me, but I think they still don't have enough depth, because they did so well in the beginning of the season and then went a bit downhill towards the last few matches, isn't it? So I think they're building something great there. I hope they stand up again this year, or somebody else. That's the magic of this URC for me. You don't know what's going to happen, and I think we talked about a little bit on Twitter about this. Is that I'm super stoked for it to start, because I don't know which time which team is going to surprise us this year. Because there's going to be somebody that we don't expect that's going to be quite surprising. So as far as the Scottish guys, I actually thought, since I started watching after the first season, and I said it quite a few times, and I said actually Glasgow's problem is they talk too much and play too little, and I actually said it on social media a few times, and they've stopped it. But I always thought that Edinburgh would do better than, because they feel like a team that plays more systematically to me. But I think towards the end of the season, especially the last 2 seasons, when they start losing some of their key players, they also kind of fall off a bit. So yes, so Glasgow was a surprise for me. Loved Benetton last year. Great for me.
And it's good to see that perception of the league and from fans and from pundits is growing, consistently growing. And like, I know we're all avid rugby fans. We'll sit down, we'll watch Zebra against Benetton on Christmas Eve if it's on Christmas Eve this year. And like, obviously we're the exceptions to the rule, but it is growing, and that's a massive part of it. And Hugh, I might just get your take before we move off this particular shield, because again, potentially 3 playoff teams there, but there's been a consistency issue there, for instance. There's been kind of, I think consistency is the best word of putting it, because Benetton on the road, Edinburgh kind of game to game, Glasgow will go through spurts in games where they just kind of fall away. If you were to pick one of them to kind of surprise anyone this year, who would you be looking at?
Well, that's a great question. I think, as everyone on the call has rightly said, Edinburgh is the one with this sort of untapped talents, the ones not maximizing their opportunity, you'd say. I think it's interesting to see whether Glasgow will be able to continue in the same vein. They had such a unique way of approaching rugby last season, with the playing wide and keeping the ball on the pitch and not kicking. So contrary to so many trends in the game at the moment, and they just kept going and going and going. And credit to Franco Smith for making that work. I think there's arguably a stance where you should say, 7th, 8th is a minimum for Benetton, when you consider that they've got pretty much the Italian team minus Garbisi playing for them. So I think it's going to be a general trend when we talk about anybody in the URC this season, is that the vast majority of fans will be expecting their team to do better than they did last season. And we can't all do better. That's not how it works. So I think it could be like,
I know one team who definitely can't do better than their league position last year. We could go unbeaten, but probably won't.
I think 5 or 6 games into the season, we're going to see some fans' heads falling off, because it's going to be like how we had such high expectations and they've not met, which again is exactly what everyone on the call has been saying, is we've got no idea what's going to happen. So from that particular shield, it's the least predictable one, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to finish off on it, Craig, I might just get your final thoughts. If you were to give us a ranking of the 4 teams heading into this season in that shield, because I think this one is really interesting for everyone, because there's 3 teams who could genuinely be top 4 or genuinely be in that kind of 9th to 12th bracket if things don't go right. So if Glasgow, Edinburgh, Benetton and Zebra, what way do you think it's going to go, Craig?
Well, the funny thing is, I want and expect Edinburgh to win it, but if I'm really going to sit with my reality head on, I would probably say Glasgow, Benetton, Edinburgh, Zebra. And that's mainly because I'm not hugely confident in Edinburgh's attack. I'm finding it incredibly dull at this moment of time, like a dull blade rather than dull boring, although it is quite boring. But I think Benetton have been slowly growing, and are actually at a point now where I feel that Benetton, if unfortunately the players are playing too much, almost playing too much rugby. But if they get a bit of a break and they get a chance to recuperate, they'll be a strong team. And then I would expect Glasgow to do exactly what they've been doing. I would like to be in a situation in my Edinburgh head. I would say it would be Edinburgh top, Benetton, then Glasgow and Zebra. But I've got to be realistic and put Edinburgh third.
I think that's fair on the basis of what we've seen last season, because without trying to be too critical just because you're kind of down on them, the way Edinburgh finished last season, they will just say was not good enough. And their worst performance of the season coming in the last game. Connacht fans will feel the same, for instance. Obviously the Sharks fans will feel the same from day one as opposed to from the last couple of weeks. So it is kind of interesting to see how it goes. But another shield that probably gets so much spotlight, some of it is fair, some of it isn't fair, is Wales. And like, Hugh, I'll get you to get the ball rolling on this, because despite spirited performances, you think of, Cardiff in particular lost, what was it, like 4 games, 4 out of their 5 losses in one spell were all with losing bonus points. They were in a lot of games. The Ospreys did make the playoffs, but it feels like there is a lot of room for optimism, as you said before. The Scarlets should kick on. The Dragons, we're hoping, should kick on. Ospreys and Cardiff are thereabouts. Your thoughts? Just give us an overview first, but your thoughts on the Welsh Shield.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to talk about with the Welsh Shield is probably the funding, because there's a lot of is it dis or misinformation, the one where people are spreading things thinking they're correct, but it's not. So
It's called Twitter.
the the communication around the funding and things in Wales has been extremely poor, and it's not a good picture, but there's been some wrong things put out there. So I'll try and just set out the picture as I see it at the moment, as I understand it, is that there's funding per team this season. The budget that they're playing to is £4.5 million each. Now, that is often referred to as funding, but I believe that it's actually a budget cap that each region has bought into, or as in signed up to in agreement with the WRU. It was actually announced yesterday that that is increasing for next season to between 6 and 6.5 million, which would be.
And I had a bit of context on that first number. If we're to work off a rolling average, Leinster have 10 central contracts. Some of them are going to be above 500k, some of them are going to be below. That's more. The players they don't pay for is more than a Scarlet's budget of £4.5 million. I'm not doing the currency thing and the exchange rate. I'm not doing any of that, but just raw numbers. And that's probably the context that should be held when we talk about Wales.
Yes. The next thing I'll say, though, is there is a perception out there that the WRU has a massive pot of money that they're sitting on and just refusing to give it to the regions. That's not the case, as my understanding. The WRU is struggling for money and they have a funding deficit in Wales. Now, that is because they have made some incredibly poor management and business decisions in the past. We've got a new leadership of the WRU, and they have been quite open in saying the previous management made some decisions that we would not have made, not least the nature of the deal with CVC, which RFU are also struggling with. And I think the SRU have also had issues with their deal with CVC. So that's kind of the context of that. As we stand today, I believe all of the regional either head coaches or CEOs have come out in the press in interviews and said that the relationship with the WRU is improving and there is a desire to fund the regions better to become more competitive. So there was a lot of stories during the summer of potentially one of the regions getting cut. That doesn't seem to have been founded in anything either the WRU or the regions have said. That was a bit of, don't know where that came from. All the assumptions moving forward are that we will continue to have 4 regions. In terms of how they do, like exactly as we've said for the other Shield as well, is there's a expectation that each of them should improve, but for different reasons. So the Dragons, who have finished second bottom in the last 3 URCs and have finished bottom Welsh region something like 17 or 18 times out of however many times it's been possible. Their biggest problem last season was they had a coaching ticket that wasn't fit for purpose. So they went from WRU ownership into private ownership, which was a huge deal for them. And their ownership also bought Rodney Parade, the stadium, which was huge for them. So off the pitch, financially, they're in as good a position they've ever been in. But last season, they had basically Di Flanagan was the only coach who was there and he was doing everything. This season, they brought in a whole new coaching roster to work below him, which should support him a lot better, not least Fiona Tia, who comes with a huge reputation and is known in Wales from his time at the Ospreys. So they're expecting big improvements there. The issue, which a lot of URC teams in that lower half of the table are going to have, is who are they going to overtake? Because to go from where they were, they could have a significant improvement and still only overtake 1 or 2 teams, if any. So they could see huge improvement in their on-field performances and just, eye test, but still kind of pick up the results. So they could end up having a pretty similar season to what Cardiff, say, had last season. And that would be, Cardiff only won 1 more game than the Dragons last season, but you perceive them as being a lot better. So it could be that kind of a deal.
They rattled a lot of top teams, Cardiff did, whereas the Dragons, they were getting their results against the Scarlets, the Ospreys, not to punch down, but against Welsh regional teams and lower teams in the table. Yeah,
and they brought in a new strength and conditioning coach as well, which is a big deal for them because, if you have a season where you pick up 20 injuries, that's unlucky. If you have 5 seasons in a row where you have 20 injuries, that's not unlucky. There's something going wrong there. Speaking of which, the Scarlets is another team that struggle with that. And the Scarlets is another team which has struggled with the coaching ticket in the past. The thing with the Scarlets is you can't really blame it on the squad or the team sheet. I believe that we've got the roster is quite strong for the Scarlets. We've got Veer Fafita, Sam Lousy, Tame Plumtree, who has been excellent since he's come in. Wales's best fly half, Sam Costello, plays for us. We've got talented players coming through, and we've got some probably the highest quality non-Welsh qualified players. Now, some people have got a bit of an issue with how many non-Welsh qualified players the Scarlets have, but we do have probably the best non-Welsh qualified players out of any Welsh region. So we've got a squad that's okay. Look, I'm not saying it's going to go toe to toe with Leinster or the Bulls, but it should be comparable to the likes of a Connacht, of a Ospreys, of the team sort of in the middle there. Cardiff, like you guys have mentioned already, were very competitive last season. They have made some recruitment, so they've had new ownership come in, and they brought in a lot of exciting new players, players from Leinster, players from South Africa, from the Currie Cup, and also Callum Sheedy, who's someone I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. And then finally, the Ospreys, probably, they had the best squad in Wales, and in Toby Booth, they had a coach who had a good CV, and he was able to tap into the DNA of the Ospreys, which is forward-orientated, set-piece-orientated rugby, which is what they've always been. And he was able to get that going, get them winning a few games, a few close games, and getting them into that 8th spot, which I think, to be fair, I think that's where they should have been. And there's been a mini documentary that the Ospreys have been putting out, and Dewi Lake also says in that documentary, yeah, this squad is a playoff level squad. So I think that's pretty fair. I think the Ospreys, their danger is stagnating because they haven't recruited massively. They brought in one or two.
The point that I made on the Rugby Rewind pod, which you didn't laugh, Lee laughed. Nicky Smith going, it is massive because you're losing a cornerstone of your set piece.
Well, you are, but the thing with Nicky Smith and the thing with the Ospreys is the Ospreys had the 3rd best scrum in terms of completion last year, but they also gave away the most penalties at the scrum in the URC last year. Now, the reason for that, and the Stormers are quite similar, is that they go for it at the scrum. It's their main weapon. So they risk giving away penalties in order to gain either gain a penalty or gain an advantage. And Nicky Smith is typical of that, and his Wales career is exactly the same. Of he could just get on the wrong side of a referee in some games,
similar to Andrew Porter, I think it's fair to say.
So his thing was he goes for it in the scrum, and 7-8 times out of 10 he wins the penalty, but he might just have one of those games where the referee just hates his face. And to be fair, the Ospreys have still got Gareth Thomas, who is Wales's starting loose head as well, and they've signed a player from the Scarlets as well, which they love to do, and he's come in, and they've kind of it's not a like for like replacement, of course it isn't, but it should do a job, I think. And they've got Duncan Jones coaching their scrum as well, who can do a job. But for the Ospreys, the question is, can they take a step forward, particularly in their attack? The majority of their tries either came from set piece, like I said, or from things like intercepts, scooping up dropped balls from defensive pressure. Open field attack was a real struggle for them. They like to do 3 passes off a line out, for example, and by the time the 3rd pass went, the defensive line was on top of them and they went backwards. They didn't win the collision. So Toby Booth said he wants better carrying from his backs. We'll see if that happens. But like he said, all 4 of the Welsh regions will be saying we'd like to improve. And like I've said previously, all 4 can't and won't improve. So it's one of the regions, like I predicted a moment ago, 6 games in is going to have its head in its hands of going, oh my God, we've either gone backwards or we've not seen the improvement that we've seen, which makes it exciting. But I do believe the painful season was last season. This season will be a season of stability, and then next season we'll probably hopefully see an improvement in competitiveness.
And Johan, I'll come to you on next, because as Hugh said, not everyone can kick on in the same year. Someone has to go backwards. But if we're going to see it from Wales, how do you fancy the chances of Ospreys, Cardiff, Scarlets? And we might just leave the Dragons for now, because I think in relative terms they could climb up a position or 2. But of the other 3 who would be expected to be challenging top 8, top 10, how do you see them go? That's for yourself there, Johan. Sorry.
For me,
yeah.
Of the matches we played against Wales teams, the Bulls now, I'm not talking about just my own team. The team that actually surprised me most was Cardiff. we went there, and I thought that it's going to be easy game. We're going to win, give them 15 points, going to be over. We almost lost that match. They fought until the bitter end, didn't they? And it was under very bad conditions. So I think, so from our perspective, you guys have to understand, before we joined the URC, we didn't know all the teams. In the teams that I knew about in Ireland was Ulster and Munster. Obviously, if you told me Leinster, but I didn't know anything about them, or Connacht. I've heard the name before, but I only knew about Munster, I knew about Ulster. What I knew on the Wales side was Cardiff and the Ospreys. I didn't know Scarlets, I didn't know any of the other stuff. And then, in Scotland, I only knew about Edinburgh. I didn't even know Glasgow. I thought Glasgow was like the soccer team or something. So yeah. So you have to understand, we come here with limited information. So when we joined, I was always excited, and I still am when the Bulls play Cardiff, because I remember hearing about Cardiff in the history, and Munster and Ulster, So yeah, I'm always focused on when we play those teams, like when the Bulls play Munster, when the Bulls play Ulster. It's a little bit much still for us, We're still learning what's going on in the history and stuff. I just want to say something. You talked about the budgets earlier. I just want to add that by us, in South Africa, the cap that you have is for players only. It doesn't include management and that kind of stuff. So we have 85 million rand, which is about roughly 4 million, euros, roughly, give or take, depending on what day you want to do the calculation. But those players are not, that's all the senior players. So Currie Cup, URC, whatever, Champions Cup, whatever league you play in, throughout an entire calendar year, you have to cover it with that money.
And look, it's definitely a factor. I was going to get into it when you brought it up, that budgets are small in Wales. They're small in South Africa as well, compared to, say, the big European teams, the top of the URC teams. And we might get onto that in a minute when we come on to South Africa. But just, Mike, really quickly before we move off Wales, Ospreys finished 8th last season. Cardiff finished 12th last season. Scarlets finished 13th or 14th last season. I'm not entirely sure which. If you were to call it, if any of them are going to make the playoffs, who's it going to be for you?
It's easy to say Ospreys again, isn't it? Yeah, I don't, honestly, I don't know. I would say the Ospreys do have the best chance. They know what it takes to get to the playoff in recent times. But that said, conceivably, there could be two teams depending on, how far they kick on. And as you said, how much has changed over the past preseason and coming into this season. So I'm going to go with the safe bet. I'm going to say Ospreys for now. That said, I think there's a lot of teams around that, 9, 10, 11 mark that could pinch it. So it's really anyone's game from that point. But yeah, I'd like to see a Welsh team in the playoff, to be honest.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is just so competitive. It's so congested in the middle of the table. You almost, if you're supporting a team, you want them to be 6th, just to kind of have a little bit of a safety blanket on a team, maybe 4 places below. Because, like, I know, Hugh, you hated that stat about the Ospreys' chance of making the playoffs and things like that, but there's such a small margin between like 12th and 8th. You don't want to be in that slip and slide.
Yeah,
The Ospreys were. Yeah,
Connacht, for example, will be a team that's thinking we could have, and should have got there. Yeah, exactly as Mike says. There's probably from 8th down to 11th. Every team in that category is thinking we should be getting that 8th spot, and I think pretty much everyone got 9 or 10 wins. It came down to bonus points. So it's crazy. This is my point of not everyone can do it. Everyone's hopeful, but 3 out of 4 people are going to be disappointed.
Bringing the right energy anyway, Hugh, that we're all excited, but someone's going to be disappointed, but that's down the line. That's fine. That's down the line. We don't care about then when that comes around. We're going to finish on South Africa, because I think it is fair to say everyone on this call and most people who talk about rugby, who love rugby, love the South African influence to the United Rugby Championship. They have been breath of fresh air. First 3 finals, all in South Africa. Stormers won the first, Munster the second, Glasgow the third, as we mentioned. And Johan, it's really interesting. South Africa have got great culture, great history, but it just feels like this is where they belong in some regards. And if you want to give me a rundown on the 4 teams or even just the Bulls, whichever you prefer, it feels like this is where they're going to be really targeting to win back that URC trophy. All four teams, realistically.
Yeah, I think I'll do. I thought a bit about all 4 teams, and I'll say a little bit about everything. And I'm going to start with the Lions. They're closest to us. Lions has always been a good team. They we like to call them ballers on a budget. They don't have enough money to fill their quota, so they have to work doubly hard. Last year, and you can see that when they get towards the end of the season and they get a few injuries, their performance falls off a bit. Which I hope they get it better this year. Just not good enough to win against us, but good job. So I think the weirdest team probably in the URC is the Sharks, isn't it? They just have players that some of us will drool over. I mean, coaches will love to have anything like that, won't they? But they are just not bringing it together. I don't know why. I always thought the teams with the best players rarely win tournaments, do they? If you have all of the best players in one place, you rarely win. And I don't know what. I'm pretty sure there's some sports science methodology behind it.
Bar the Toulon team of the early 2010s, Galacticos haven't really won in rugby. It's been about who can get the accumulation of wins. And this is a point I made the other night. I genuinely believe if the Sharks replaced like Bongi with Grobler, and if they replaced say Etzebeth with Nortia, and those kind of signings had less marquee players and more brilliant club players, they'd be a better team. They'd basically be in the Bulls' shoes. And that's probably the way South African people feel, because they have top end talent, but consistency is just not there with them, is it?
Yeah. So all throughout my history of watching rugby since I was a small boy in the 80s, the Sharks have always been that team that some years they have an excellent squad and they can get to the semi-final or the final and almost never win it. So I don't know why they're like that. Their fans will tell you the same thing. It's frustrating team to support, but they do have a nice vibe. I like the Sharks. I've always liked them. Yes, so let's move on to the Stormers, which is our mortal enemies, obviously. Yes, Bulls. So because okay, they are older union than us, but since our union year have been established, we're about 50-50 in terms of silver. We're a little bit in front of them. So the Bulls have won a little bit more than them. And so we hate each other. We will probably go, that North and South movies that you always see, the Americans will probably make war against each other like that. So they gone through some nasty management issues. So they were also the richest union. So can I tell you a little bit about the unions before that we had in the past? Yeah, so we had provincial unions, much like what Ireland had, but we were all independent. So the Northern Transvaal, which is now the Bulls, it still actually exists. All the unions still exist. So every union created their own rules and the way they are managed. And here where I am, the union owns all the assets. So Loftus is outright owned, no debts. All the sports facilities, everything is outright owned by the union, which is a non-profit organization. They take care of amateurs, part of the sport and schools and whatever. So they also share in the profits the Bulls make, which is then plowed back into schools and to the amateur games and, you know, the small amateur clubs and whatever. So it's funded like that. A strange thing here in South Africa is that every union, let's look at the old Western Province, which is now the Stormers. They have their own rules, and their voting and stuff works completely different to ours. So it was completely separate from each other. We had our own thing, we had our own rules, our own constitution, everything, and they had theirs. And so the same with the Cheetahs, same with all of them. So maybe that puts things in perspective a little bit, where the history comes from. So Western Province have done incredibly badly in the Currie Cup. They have lost almost all their games against very weak teams, you know. We have teams like Griffins and Pumas and those kind of guys that you guys never even have heard of in the Currie Cup, right? So yeah, so they've done incredibly bad. Played some players that are 19, 20 years old. I don't know. Dobson seems to think, well, he's working towards a plan, right? He's working towards a plan. He keeps on saying he wants to develop local people. So if they go on that trajectory, it will probably take them a year or two before they do very well again. I hope it works out for them, but that's their plan. Okay, now the Bulls, right? So what's happening that's interesting? So we've recruited quite a few people over the last 2-3 seasons. Last season we recruited quite a bit of people. We still didn't have a tight head lock, and Kalen doesn't want to give me Klein. I don't know why. I've asked him many times, but we've recruited one now. We've recruited Visa. He's played a few Currie Cup matches, and yeah, I think we're ready to go. I think I said earlier that I didn't expect us to go that far in the URC because it was a lot of new people into the squad, a lot of holes filled. We needed a good tight head. We have one now in Wilco Low. He's probably the strongest tight head that we have in South Africa. He's stronger than anyone. I haven't seen anyone scrumming. And then I include Stormers in that. So yeah, he used to play with France. They used to be. There was nothing in between the two of them, right? When they were both at the Stormers when they were young. So yeah, he went overseas, and yeah, he's now by us. He weighs 145 kilograms. It is the biggest man I've ever seen. I'm quite tall. I'm about 6'4", around there. That guy is huge. He is. I don't know if he'll get through a normal door. That's how broad he is. He is a giant. Anyway. So my expectation for the Bulls was I thought we'd qualify, at least be top 8, which we did. But, you know, having so many new players in and new coaches, we trying out a new defense coach. I didn't think we'll make the final. We luckily did. Lost a lot of players in the last 2 matches to injury. And yeah, I just couldn't make it. But I hope we go one step further this year. I'm very positive. I think there's lots of lessons learned from last season, and we go again. But I'm super stoked, man. I want to see which team is going to pop out of the rafters. You know, there's going to be somebody who's going to surprise us all. I don't know who it is yet. Last year it was Benetton, wasn't it? It was a super surprise with them.
Yeah, well, who knows? Maybe we see Zebra marching all the way to the playoffs after they beat Glasgow their week. You know, I don't know anyone who'd root against it. I certainly wouldn't. Maybe a few Benetton fans, I don't know. But Craig, I'll bring you in here because, as Johan mentioned, the Sharks are an enigma. The Stormers, they should probably be a little bit better than what they've been doing, at least last season anyway. Maybe not 2 seasons before that. And the Bulls will be out for revenge. Then you've got the Lions, who was probably half the league's second favourite team. It's so finely balanced. But what are you keen to look out for in that South African Shield?
I think for me, we've talked a lot about the Lions. We've talked a lot about the Bulls, and the team. We just going back to what you were talking about earlier about the Sharks. The Sharks are really very, very similar to Edinburgh. They've got a phenomenal roster, and they just don't seem to be doing very much with it, and it's quite it amazes me on a regular basis. Now I don't know. I'm convinced it's a coaching issue with Edinburgh, and I don't know if it's a coaching issue with the Sharks. But I want to. I'd be interested to see where the Stormers are in all of this at the moment, because I think the Stormers were the team that everybody went, oh, when we found out that the South African teams were joining the URC, we all went, wow, the Stormers are going to wipe the floor with us. And I don't know whether that's because the Stormers, again, going back to what Johan said, we were similar. I was similar. I didn't know a massive amount about the teams, apart from what I watched on Super Rugby, and the Stormers always stood out, mainly because I'm still a massive fan of Kitsoff, and he played for the Stormers. So I'm interested to see what they can do, because I think it's about time they actually performed, because the Bulls have really shown everyone what a strong, well coached South African team can do, especially that semi final in Dublin, when they beat Leinster and then went on to win the championship. It's so the Bulls, automatically you expect a high performance from them in the season, but I really feel that, and I know they're your dreaded enemy, Johan, but I'm really interested to see if the Stormers can actually put something together, because they have some phenomenal players, and they've got a lot of pressure on their shoulders, I think.
Absolutely. Hugh,
Yeah,
I'm going to sorry, Johan, you jump ahead first.
Oh, sorry, I wanted to answer him. The Stormers are building towards something. Remember, Dobber was the head coach. He didn't have any management inputs before. He now has, with the new equity partner and everything. He's been promoted to director of rugby, which is similar to role to Jake at the Bulls. So Jake will coach or have an overview of all the leagues that we play in, but he won't coach directly everyone. He only coaches the URC, and even in the URC, he has 3-4 coaches. He doesn't run around much on the pitch himself. He just gives more direction. So Dobbo will have the similar role now for the Stormers, and he has a view of developing local talents. So that's going to take a while, right? So any kind of big direction change a team goes into, you're going to take a season or two to adapt. So I think last season they struggled a bit. I think that we're going to see a little bit more struggling this year, but I think from next season they should be, well within their new director's vision, and probably do better. I hope for them. As long as they don't do better than us, I'll be happy.
The Stormers are an interesting one. I can see them kicking on, but it's probably worth adding that bit of context that there has been changes in the background, and that'll affect the likes of Dobson, it'll affect players, it'll affect everything. Maybe that'll take a little bit of time to bend in. We'll wait and see. Hugh, I'm going to put you on the spot. It was Bulls, Stormers, Lions, Sharks last year. In 4 words or 5 words or 6 words, how would you see it going this year?
Bulls will stay top. Oh shit, I've only got 2 words left.
I'll let you off. I'll give you a free pass here.
Bulls will stay top. The Sharks have got to do better, man. Surely. So I'll say the Sharks to go into 2nd place. Stormers then Lions. I just think Lions just haven't got enough in terms of squad depth. I love the Lions. I love watching them. I love their players. But every year they get the best players taken by the Sharks, and they just don't have the depth. And they don't. Sometimes they just come up against a team who knows how to play against them, because they're a counter-attacking team, and you can't counter-attack if you have the ball. So I think they'll always be the team that just agonizingly falls short for me, which is sad, because like I said, I love them, but I think that's what's going to happen.
Are they kind of the new are they the South African Connacht? Smallest budget, nice brand of rugby, but just fall short consistently, potentially. And I say that as a man living in Galway, but that's beside the point. We're going to get on to predictions because, as I've said before many times, there's no point having you on here if I can't hold you to account for what you're going to say. So I may as well do that here as well. Mike, I'm going to start with yourself with your biggest underperformer and overperformer this season. It doesn't have to be the Italian sides because that would be kind of easy, but in the league in general.
So teams, right?
Yeah, teams.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to say the biggest underperformers are going to be the Sharks again. I think there's definitely an element where when you have so many sort of big players in a team, sometimes it's better to have, less, let's say more of a sort of standard of less test rugby players and more of like a club standard, but just having the team at a higher standard as opposed to having that individual brilliance like sort of littered across. So I'm going to say them, and then the biggest overachievers. I, and I mean no disrespect to this, but I think Ospreys, if they manage to make it sort of into the playoffs, I don't think they'll make it sort of eighth. I think they could probably go a little bit higher. If that is the case, I think they've definitely overachieved considering sort of the budget, and then if you consider the teams in that top sort of bracket where you'd expect them to be, I think Ospreys are probably going to be some of the biggest overachievers this season.
Can't argue with those two. Craig, I'll let you go next on the overperformers and underperformers.
Is that of last season or this season coming?
This season coming.
This season coming, okay. Overperformers. I think Cardiff are going to give us they're hopefully going to. You see, the problem I have with Cardiff is that they are they're at their most dangerous when there's an interruption in play. So somebody drops a ball, etc. They can counterattack. They can be incredibly quick to counterattack and score tries, but they need a little bit more structure, I feel, and actually to put their set pieces together and work off from a set piece. But I think they have very, very similar to Benetton. They have the ability. Benetton's slightly moved on from this now, but they had the ability to absolutely scare teams, and just catch them off guard. And I think if they can put this all together and have a little bit more settled season, without the background hoo-ha going on, etc., I think that Cardiff could overperform this year. Underperforming wise, I'm going to be a bit bitchy here and say I think it's going to be Glasgow, because I don't, everyone's expecting Glasgow to come along and win, and
I love this shade on you, Craig. It's wonderful.
I'm looking at because I've not upset John Anderson and Johnny McGinty on our podcast for some time yet, so I've had to just sit down and bow my head and say yeah, you've won. So I think everyone's expecting Glasgow to walk into this, and I've talked about this in the podcast earlier on. I've talked about that I would expect Glasgow to kick on, and I think that Franco Smith is a fantastic coach. He did a huge amount with Benetton, and he did a huge amount with the Italian national team. I think he's going to be fantastic for Glasgow. He's going to be known as a very, very good coach for Glasgow, in the echelons of Glasgow themselves. But they have the ability to trip over their egos very, very quickly. And I'm concerned that that's going to happen. Well, I'm not concerned at all. I'm looking for that to happen. So we'll wait and see. But yeah, I would expect Glasgow to be the biggest underperformance.
Is it a difficult second album for you, Craig? Is
Absolutely.
that what you're going for?
Yeah, difficult second out. Well, the thing is, that's what happened the last time they won the it wasn't the URC at that time, but
Pro 12.
12, yeah.
They came along and then everyone left, and they, including the coach. So yeah, we'll wait and see. But yeah, I'm not sure they'll manage to do it again. Oh, I don't know. You start saying these things about Glasgow, and then Glasgow come out and slap you around. So I'll have to be careful.
I know exactly what that part feels like.
Yeah,
That's the worst.
yeah.
That's the worst part about it. Johan, I'll let you go next. Relative to kind of the standards that we set on them, who's your underperformer and overperformer?
I hope Edinburgh plays as well as I think they can. And I've watched them for 3 seasons, and every season I watch them and I think, yo, they can be very dangerous, but they never get over those last 4 weeks for some other reason of the season, they just drop down. So I hope they'll be in it. Underperformer. That's going to be a difficult one. I have no idea. Can I say something else rather?
Go on.
My biggest wish is that any one of the teams from the URC is in the final of the champs.
I'll take that. I'll
Yeah,
definitely take that.
Yeah.
That would be good, especially with the French. The French love in, I can say as someone who is a part of the French love in at the moment, but also the French rising that we're starting to see as well. It's important to note. Hugh, your underperformer, your overperformer. Which way are you leaning?
For overperformer, I'm going to go for a team that we haven't talked about on this pod. I'm going to say Ulster.
I like that one. I like that one. Yes.
Because they've got the new coach in. There's a bit of a feel-good factor. All their fans have deluded themselves into thinking their kit is nice, and it isn't. But they're doing the cope.
It gets worse the more I see it. It somehow gets paler the more I see it.
It's a white t-shirt.
Hey, listen, you're talking about Edinburgh. You're talking about that. Edinburgh had an away kit that looked like a pair of jammies for a long, long time.
But I think they've gone through the storming period. I think the players stuck together to a degree during that, and they've got the new coach in. I think they're going to change their style. They were horrid at times last season, so I think they're going to bounce back from that, and they're going to have the classic case of a really bad season followed by a quite good season, and then everyone thinks it's a miracle, but actually no, it was just last season was really bad.
I'm going to have to correct you there. No one in Ireland is going to think it's a miracle because either A, they're all aboard the Richie Murphy bandwagon because he's Richie Murphy and he's got a great pedigree, or B, Irish rugby media do what they always do, forget Ulster exist until they lose and then go, oh shit, why did Ulster just lose? So it's going to be one of the two.
It's a pitch.
Sorry, go on, Craig.
Sorry, it's Stevie's Ferris and all that. They've just blamed the pitch all the time. Oh, it's this new pitch. Oh, it's a terrible pitch. What, have you been tripping over it or something? Come on and play. Anyway, sorry.
The other thing about Ulster was that I forgot what I was going to say now. Anyway, move on.
Do you want to do underperformer?
Do my overperformer. Sorry, underperformer. My underperformer. I'm going to go, and I know I'm disagreeing with you on this, Kaelin. I'm going Stormers, big underperformer. My reason for saying so is that last season I watched them and they've got an incredible roster of players. Last season I watched them so many times and they would play absolute garbage for 78 minutes. And then they would have 2 minutes of Manu Lebok or Damien Willems or someone would bail them out and they'd get the victory by a point. And everyone go, Stormers won again. That makes sense. And like, no, they were shocking at times last season. Like the home defeat to the Ospreys, like other performances that I could list. I think they tore horribly. I think they lost every single tour game last season.
They beat Connacht second last game of the season, but that was legitimately one of the worst URC games of the season. Of 150 odd games. It was dire. And
you look at the players from the Stormers that get picked for South Africa as all the forwards, but they don't play a forward-oriented game. The best game that I saw the Stormers play last season was against Stade Francais in the Champions Cup, where they shoved them into next week. They acquainted them with their own backsides for 80 minutes up front, and then they didn't play like that again for the rest of the season, and they weren't anywhere near as good. So I think Dobson is trying to put square pegs in round holes. I can see them like crowbarring Manu Lebok, Sasha, Damien Willems, Wycland all into the same starting lineup, just have the best players on the pitch, and it just not working at all. I think that they are going to. I didn't want to say it because I knew this question was coming, so I didn't want to give a spoiler when you asked me for the Shield predictions for South Africa. But I think the Lions could be a lot closer to them this season because they've got the players, but they're just not implementing the game plan to get the best out of them. And someone needs to make a tough decision. One of Manny, Willems, and Sasha has to go. And I think it's probably going to be Manny, which makes me sad because he's one of my favorite players in the world.
But it's probably going to be Lebok. Like we've seen this story before with like run-of-the-mill top 14 team would go on a run and then their 10 hits the skids and they go, right, good luck, we'll get the next guy. It's basically what we've seen before. But to be fair, we've had this conversation last season about Stormers, and you've said, geez, they're not playing well. And I've been like, okay, yeah, I agree. The only thing is, I do think they'll try and steady things. My biggest concern with them is, with the amount of box being gone, will it start to take a toll this season? Because if it eventually does catch up on teams, and like if they lose Sasha as well as maybe not having Libok or Willemse in, say, the start of the season, maybe the skids does hit them, and maybe they do start to rattle. But we'll wait and see. I'd still.
Question for Johan then: would you take Manny Libok back at the Bulls?
No.
I'm not surprised. I mean, he doesn't suit the Bulls, does he?
I think he does. I think the way they're playing at the moment,
We
he
had
does.
a 3-year contract with him. We started him in a few matches, and he just was relegated to the bench all the time because he. Remember, we have Wilson, who is an 83% plus kicker. We also had at that time we had Chris Smith, which was also over 80% kicker, and Chris Smith added physicality to it. So he's basically like a center playing 10.
Well, exactly. So I would put Manny at 10, Chris Smith at centre to kick the goals. Job done. Title, here we come.
Yeah, Chris has left now. He's in France now. So we have Wilson and that guy that comes from Scotland. What's his name? Van
der Vault.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah. So we have him now. He's struggling to adopt to the Bulls game plan. He's played a lot of Currie Cup matches now. I still see him not. He's not fitting into our game plan well. He looks uncomfortable. Maybe I should say it in that way. He looks uncomfortable. The same way Mani was uncomfortable at the Bulls.
That's easy to happen.
I wanted to say something about Ulster, if I may.
Yep, go on.
I feel like Ulster is such a good team. I love to watch them play. They are a great team, and I'm thinking back
really. I found Ulster very hard to watch the last couple of years. I'm not going to lie, especially under McFarland.
Last season, but they just need a flame, right? Like remember when Dwayne was there, and a lot of Irish people actually made a lot of snide comments because he didn't play too much, whatever. But we found out later he only was supposed to play like 8 games or something. They had like only specific games that he could play. Yeah. But when he was in the team in those matches, it was like he was a fire that they needed, right? And they played much better, and they lost by the skin of their teeth to the Stormers in Cape Town that year.
Yeah, and I mean, they are a bit of an enigma. I think they're the enigma in Irish rugby, but that's going to be a word we're going to use a lot, especially in this competition. Shield winners, now, we are kind of running tight on time, so I'm going to need it to be maybe not 6 words, Hugh, so don't start counting again, but as close to as quick as possible. Craig, your 4 Shield winners this year.
Edinburgh, Leinster, Bulls, Ospreys.
Okay. I don't agree with 2 of them, but anyways, or 3 of them really, but anyways. Johan, your 4 Shield winners.
Okay, I think it will be the Bulls. I think, I don't know why, but I have a feeling Cardiff is going to stand up and be counted this year. I don't know why. I've got no sensible reason for it. I just feel they've got something psychological that's going to push them up above everybody else. I think Munster's going to win the Shield this year.
I didn't pay him to say that before anyone asks. I did not pay him to say that.
Yeah.
Not yet. I think it's Munster's year. They've been working towards this for 3-4 years now. I think everything will come together eventually for them. I think, I hope Edinburgh wins. So my list is also more a wish list, right? I have no any kind of set to back it up. So this is my favorite teams that I think is going to win.
I just want to caveat that Leinster, Ospreys, not my favorite teams. I did put in Edinburgh because they're my favorite team.
Is that kind of, well, if I put in a team I don't like along with the team I like, that balances it out? Is that kind of it?
Yeah, I'm a yin and yang guy, you know.
That's not what I have used, but okay.
I think Edinburgh has such a great playing system. And some or others, so systems eat talent for breakfast, right? So they at some stage this system has to start, producing the goods. And I feel it's going to be this year. I hope it's going to be this year, this
Fingers
season.
crossed. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we'll see. It'll be Ben Healy if they do, so it's a win-win for me. Mike, your 4 Shield winners, if you don't mind.
Yep. Leinster, Glasgow, Osprey, Sharks, and I'll caveat that I do think I wouldn't be surprised if Benetton came top of the Scottish Italian table. Yeah, that's it.
I'll just go Benetton because I love Benetton, and listen, I'm a Munster fan. I don't like Glasgow. I like Edinburgh just a little bit more than I like Glasgow, and I don't think Zebra will do it. I'll go Munster because I'm a Munster fan. I'll go with the Ospreys, and I'll go with. Again, I kind of have to go with the Stormers. If you listen to the United Rugby Rewind pod, I can't do what I did on that and not back the Stormers. I was so emphatic on them. Hugh, I'll let you start things off with our winner, your
You didn't ask me my
URC
Shield
winner.
winners, you bastard.
Oh, sorry, Shield winners first. Sorry.
I'm gonna go interesting. Well, Bulls isn't interesting. Bulls are my pick for South Africa. I'm gonna go Scarlets. Fuck it. And then I'm gonna go Benetton. Why not? And what's the other one? I'll tell you what. You know how everyone says, "Oh, the Shields don't matter. Shields don't matter." If Leinster don't finish top Irish province this season, suddenly the Shield might start to matter. And the meltdown
Now
on
you're
off the
getting it. Now you're
meltdown on
spending
off
enough
the
time
ball.
talking to me.
The meltdown on off the ball would actually be justified this season if Leinster don't finish top Irish province. So, yeah, Munster, I think.
And oh yeah, so Bulls, Scarlets. Who was
Benetton.
the Benetton and Munster? I actually, that's a good list. That's a legitimate. That's a like I could root for all those teams. I already root for one of them by root for all those lists, and I will give you a take on off the ball when we finish, so I can't get sued. I'll let you start things off. So Hugh, who is your URC winner?
I've got an unbelievable knack of picking the runners up because I picked the All Blacks to win the World Cup and I picked the Bulls to win the URC last season.
Don't you dare say Munster are going to win the URC.
So. Maybe I just need to counter my interesting Shield picks by going boring and saying Leinster URC title. They got to win something at some point, surely. Geordie Barrett's going to be there with the URC title, just like going, fuck you. That's my prediction.
We've already recorded the provincial episode, even though it comes out a week after this one. So you'll get my winner on that. Even though, come to think of it, I may have done Shield winners and said something different. Now I think of it, which is really inconsistent podcasting. Johan, who is your URC winner in a word in May 2025?
Okay. I don't know why, but I have a feeling Leinster's probably going to do poorer this season. Few players leaving there that might be more important than they expect. So they'll still be up there, but I think they're not going to win. I think I'm not going to say Bulls because it's my own team. So if there's any other team that I think probably could win it, it would be
Benetton.
That would be fantastic, right? That would be so awesome. No, I think it would be Munster. I don't know why. I just have a feeling Munster's gonna bring it all together this season. I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope they at least do very well.
Greg,
I don't know.
I'll let you. Sorry.
I have this feeling that Munster is owed some silverware for everything they've done over the last 2 seasons.
I already feel that way. I always feel that way. Craig, I'll let you go. Who's your winner?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be Leinster. I think Glasgow are going to, I think Glasgow are going to bump up against the tricky second album, and I think Leinster are actually going to get their act together because they've got it. With all the help that they get from World Rugby. Sorry, no, the IRF. No, World Rugby. Sorry, I don't know which one's which one. It's the same. It's the same office, isn't it? Really?
Your new performance director is who was giving them the benefits, I think.
So yeah, I think they need to get their act together, because I'll tell you what, here's a prediction for you: if Leinster don't do anything this season, this will be Leo Cullen's last season. I can
I like that.
guarantee it. You know, I think they need to get their act together.
We have our tagline, Leo Cullen's last season. It's not going to be, but it could be.
You never
Mike,
know.
your final up. Who is your winner of the URC? You can say Benetton. I will
No,
let
no,
you
no.
say
I'm not,
Benetton.
come on, let's be realistic. I mean, it'd be good, but no, I think the South African sides always finish really strong, don't they? So I'm gonna go Bulls this year.
I mean, I can't argue
Yeah,
with any of those picks so far. No one came out and said the Dragons or anything like that, so I can't really argue with any of them. I'm sorry if there's any Dragons fans listening.
Can I take it back and say Zebra now?
Yeah, go on. Look, they've got nicer jerseys than Dragons, so we'll just go off that. Gentlemen, it has been a pleasure to look ahead to the new season with you. My thanks to Hugh Griffin, to Mike Petretta, to Johan Jordan, and to Craig Manson. Brilliant as always, and thanks home to everyone for listening. If you want more URC content, we have that provincial preview that I named. That's coming next week. We've got a team by team series doing the rounds on my WordPress account, which the link is below, looking at each and every team this week. So make sure to check that out. We've got the United Rugby Rewind. We got the Red Army pod. I promise you I do get to sleep at certain points. I've been backloading these. It's fine. Links are below, but do make sure to give them a go ahead of the new season. As always, if you like what you see here, please do subscribe. And of course, check out the different pods that the lads are on: Scottish Rugby Pod, Pirate Rugby Pod, Australian Rugby Pod. Sure, you can never have too many rugby podcasts. Anyways, till next time, take it easy.